Good morning, everyone. Today I'm joined by Professor Lahra Smith, Associate Professor in our School of Foreign Service and our Government Department, and Director of our African Studies program in the School of Foreign Service. So Lahra, thank you for taking the time to join us in conversation and for your leadership and your many contributions to our community. And you've recently taken on the role of Director of African Studies. And it's an area that you've had a deep commitment to, a program that you spent 14 years in here at Georgetown. I recently spoke with our program's former director, Scott Taylor, and he talked about the work of, in his words, bringing Africa to Georgetown and Georgetown to Africa through our African Studies program. Can you offer your perspectives on the importance and contributions of this program, now celebrating its 40th anniversary, and the areas of focus that you see it continuing to develop as you take on this new responsibility?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And well, that's a perfect quote. And I should start by saying that it's especially it's an honor and a privilege to take on the leadership role, but it's a pleasure to take it on from somebody like Dr. Taylor, who has done just that, which I will hope to follow in the traditions of. But yeah, I mean, I think it's for the time that I've been here and really for my training, I've always seen Africa as core to the world. And so it's a pleasure to be at a university that wants to make the teaching and study and research about the continent also central to what it does. And I think that's what will continue as a tradition, is building off of that approach of really seeing the study of Africa, 55 countries, hundreds of millions of people. I was looking up again this morning the stat, 60% of Africa's population is below 25. I mean, it's really a dynamic, youthful continent, and that's something that resonates with our students. It's part of what we bring in terms of our teaching on the hilltop about Africa and the study of Africa. So we love energizing new students to study Africa, but we also, as I think Dr. Taylor's comment reflects, and will definitely be something that I'll be eager to continue and build on, even with my colleagues' help, is bringing students to Africa, because we really think that there's only so much that we can do here in our classrooms, but getting students there is really key. So I will seek to continue and deepen that tradition.
Thank you. Thank you. Now share with us how the pandemic is shaping your work, both in terms of how you're staying connected, but also how its impact is influencing the activities and priorities of African studies.
Well, I mean, so the most urgent and sort of immediate effect is that we can't take students, and we ourselves have at least for a while had to sort of put on hold some of our in-field research, both of those things being core to what we do. And, none of us are sort of armchair Africanists either. We like to get to the continent. So that's the immediate impact that we've seen, is in those ways. How, as a program and as my faculty colleagues, I think, have been thinking about this over the summer, we worked together, was how can we bring the continent here more than maybe we had thought about, sort of reverse that. So through guest speakers from the continent, that in the past that was sort of always a hurdle that we couldn't quite overcome, and now we're using the technologies we've been trained in. I have a guest speaker coming from Mauritania next week, thanks to a referral from a colleague who will speak to my pro seminar. But I think that's one way that all of us are doing that. It certainly had an impact on that. We normally are encouraging students to get to study abroad on the continent. It's not clear how soon that will happen. So making sure that we have events that feature our colleagues and students from the continent, that we're thinking more creatively about how to build in student interactions through our classrooms, will be kind of the immediate and definitely doable sort of way for us to approach the pandemic's impact.
Thank you. Now, much of your research focuses on migration and the idea of what it means to have meaningful citizenship, or how citizenship is practiced, how rights are exercised. I know you recently published a paper on women migrants from Ethiopia. Could you share some of your insights with us? How should we think about citizenship?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, my work has been about citizenship for a long time now, since I started in Ethiopia, and And in some ways, it started as pretty classic political science institutions: who is a citizen, who isn't a citizen. But very quickly in my time in Ethiopia, it became obvious that just like in the United States, in a place like Ethiopia, throughout East Africa, it's not just the boundaries of formal legal citizenship, but it's what people do with that citizenship, how they contest it, how they make it meaningful to them and to each other in their community. And so that was the focus of my first book. And as I've expanded more recently into refugee and migration studies, which is sort of also very much about literally the boundary making of citizens, thinking about how people's movements, whether, irregular, regular, documented or undocumented, but how those are also expressions of aspirations to citizenship, is really how I see it. So my work in Djibouti with a colleague from American University has been about Ethiopian women migrants that travel through Djibouti to the Gulf states primarily. They are ostensibly cast as economic migrants, but their migrations are much more complicated than that. And what we found was that also their understandings of how this will contribute to them as citizens at home in Ethiopia, either about citizenship that's been blocked somehow in Ethiopia through the state sometimes, but also sometimes through their community memberships and their families even. And so their aspirations to move for economic opportunity as also expressions of certainly agency, but also expressions of citizenship, expressions of dreams of citizenship and a more fuller citizenship that they want to participate in, that they see themselves participating in. So that's a paper that we've just sent out, and we hope to make that into a larger book project, interviewing Ethiopian migrants who've come home back to Ethiopia from the Gulf states.
And you've also done work to explore the role of teachers in shaping a sense of citizenship and civic responsibility, specifically through civic education programs in Kenya. Could you talk a little bit about that work?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those questions came to me very early on before I came to Georgetown. I was at USAID in Kenya, and sort of became frustrated by this focus both in the development world, but also in traditional political science around civic education as an election-related activity. It's a good time to think about this, right? Because we have a fair amount of civic education going on in our own political milieu. But of course, we know that there's lots that happens between elections. And that's how I got interested in high school teachers, was really thinking about what's happening for youth that are about to become citizens and in the between election times. So I have a project that is looking at the new constitution in Kenya, which was ratified in 2010, and how are teachers teaching that constitution, especially how do they teach the parts of it that were the sort of object of conversation, if you will, the formal politics and the sort of informal, semi-formal aspects of it. How do teachers see their role in making new citizens in a democracy, an emerging democracy like Kenya?
Thank you. Now, you've also been a mentor with our Georgetown Scholars Program, which supports our first generation and low income students, and you serve as co-chair of our first generation faculty and staff initiative. Can you share more about your experiences with these programs? What support is important for our young people this year as they face the challenges of this year?
Well, it's also just a pleasure to be part of those programs. The GSP is a program that's really near and dear to my own heart as a first generation student myself, and a former McNair scholar, somebody who really has benefited from mentorship and support of others, to find myself here after growing up in rural New Hampshire, never imagining these opportunities. For me to be part of programs like that is a pleasure. The faculty and staff initiative is also really exciting because I think as a faculty member, we're often there in the faculty world. We know our staff colleagues support us in so many ways, but this was really a chance to have a kind of substantive bridging of those and to get to know so many staff members who are also first gen, as first gen faculty also exist, and to sort of create a community from that. So that initiative was both to identify and support faculty and staff who are first generation, the first in their families to go to college, and also for us to identify ourselves to our students. And so one of the things I do every year since then is I wear my first gen t-shirt and start class that way, by sort of outing myself. And, for somebody like me who went to all public universities for my own education, there were a fair number of people around who were also first in their families. But, I find at Georgetown students, there's this sense, well, all my faculty must have gone to, these elite universities, and I might be the interloper here. And so as a faculty member, to really, sort of identify with them, say, please come and see me, if you have questions about this place that sort of baffle you, because I too had those questions about my university, is really fun, and has led to some really meaningful conversations. Sometimes later, right? It's not often that first time, but months or even a year later that a student comes and says, that was really important to me that you said that, or I have a question. I think, to your second question of what do our students need, I think we all know this, but I'm hearing from my students as well that they need connection. And that is a challenge to find enough hours in the day to do it, but I think we're part of a team. And so I see myself as a faculty member playing a role. My staff colleagues certainly do, other students do very much. So I do a lot of peer mentoring, especially in this online environment. I'm doing a little bit more of kind of asking an older student, either an alum that was in one of my classes or a student who's a junior or senior, to pop in for 5 minutes to a Zoom class and say something about what they've done to sort of be inspiring and connecting. But also just, my office hours, those sorts of ways to connect with students one-on-one, I think is really crucial. Also, I've been really trying to think about, my bigger class has students in different time zones, so how to create assignments where they can be, synchronously working on an activity together. So I've done some paired work for that, because I've heard from them that they feel really kind of disconnected. Some of them are, far away and really can't reasonably be expected to join my class at the middle of the day, Eastern time, in the middle of the night, their time. So just, those kinds of connections are obviously what we're all aiming for as a team together at Georgetown.
Yeah. Each year when you're teaching your SFS Pro Seminar, you have shared with your students a copy of the report of our working group on slavery, memory, and reconciliation. Can you talk about why it is so important that you begin your courses with this? How has engaging with our history as an institution, and particularly our involvement in the enslavement of people of African descent, how has that shaped how you approach your class material and discussion?
Yeah, I think it's really important to teach the working group report. I mean, the report itself aspires to be part of our collective identity and conversation, and therefore I think it behooves us to find ways to do that, particularly in the formal classroom, right? It's a signal when faculty say, this is important enough that I'm going to give time and I'm going to connect it, not just in our co-curricular activities. So I do, I teach it always at the pro seminar, and this fall I'm teaching it in both of my classes. Obviously, it's an opportunity for us to think about, talk about, expose Georgetown's history, but also to really, I see it as becoming comfortable and knowledgeable with histories of slavery in the United States, which are so central to our country's conversation. And we have a unique responsibility, but also a unique opportunity because of that history and because of its documentation to take it up, and to have those conversations. So, that's why and how I do it. I also think, right now, it's never more important. And in some ways, I'm grateful that I've been, sometimes grappling easily, sometimes challenging myself and struggling with how to integrate the working group report, because I think it's made it easier for me to think about now, how will I take the Black Lives Matter movement, anti-racism curriculum into my own classroom in even broader ways, and to use that as a as a starting point that's about Georgetown's history, but also really about the larger conversation that I definitely hear from our students over and over and over again. They want us to do as faculty. They want us to help them do that. It's part of our responsibility. So for me, the working group report is foundational to Georgetown, but it's also a gift that I thank the working group and the president's office for providing, because it gives me the way to begin a conversation that I hope and plan to always extend throughout my whole semester.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your leadership here in our community. As we close, is there a message you'd like to share with everyone in our community?
You know, you use the word community, and I think that is the message, right? In African studies, we really feel that the community is the biggest strength that we have, and I think that's never more true than both in the midst of a pandemic and a global conversation, but especially an American conversation about race and anti-racism. And so I lean on this community very much to help me to do that better and more compassionately, and I hope that others will lean on me as well.
Thank you. Laura, thank you for joining us today and for all that you mean to our community, the experiences you create for our students, your scholarship, the way you've created a sense of belonging for our first generation community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here today. I look forward to being with you all again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you, for every Hoya, everywhere.